Close your eyes and imagine waking up, not in your bed, not even in a medieval hut or Roman insula, but in the Ice Age. You're not in pajamas, there's no mattress, no blanket warm from a dryer. You're wrapped in a stiff animal hide, probably reindeer or mammoth skin, and the smell hits you first, smoke, sweat and grease that hasn't been washed in months. The air bites you before you even sit up. The cold is immediate, gnawing, relentless. This isn't the kind of cold that makes you shiver for a moment before your heater kicks in. This is the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that makes your teeth ache just by breathing, that lingers all day no matter what you do. And before we dive too far into this frozen nightmare, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more slow, immersive journeys into the past. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Now, let's crawl out of your fur cocoon together, shall we? The bed you never wanted. Your bed is nothing more than a pile of hides layered on pine branches. The branches are meant to keep you off the icy ground, but they've flattened over time. Every shift you make reminds you of knots and sticks digging into your skin. The hides themselves are stiff, oily, and crawling with lice. Yes, lice. Everyone has them. They're your uninvited bedfellows, and they don't care that you're exhausted. There's no pillow. If you're lucky, you used a bundle of grass wrapped in hide to keep your head from lying directly on stone. But don't get too comfortable. It stinks. Everything stinks. Your bedding smells like every night you've ever sweated through it. And guess what? It's not getting washed anytime soon. Soap, not invented. Washing hides, possible, but only in desperate times. Because water freezes and smoke drying takes forever. So you sleep in filth, and it's normal. You stretch, but regret it instantly. Your joints ache, your back cracks, and your skin feels raw from the cold. You're maybe 20 years old, but your body feels middle-aged already. Survival ages you fast. The cave, the fire, and the smell. Look around. You're in a cave, or maybe a crude shelter of mammoth bones covered in hides. The walls glisten with frost. The ceiling is blackened by smoke from the fire that struggled all night to keep you alive. The fire never truly goes out, because if it does, relighting it is agony. Flint sparks work, but not every time. And carrying embers between shelters can be the difference between life and death. The fire doesn't warm the whole place. It's too small, the cold too vast. Instead, it fills the cave with smoke, stinging your eyes and coating your lungs. Every breath tastes like ash. Your chest rattles with a cough you've had since last winter. Everyone coughs. It's normal here. The Ice Age is one long respiratory hazard. The smell, oh, it's unforgettable. Imagine damp fur, rancid fat, unwashed bodies, and the stench of marrow bones cracked open for soup. That's the background perfume of your life. Your family of survivors. You're not alone. In the corner, curled up in hides, your family stirs. Small groups, bands of 20, maybe 30 at most, were the only way to survive. Too many mouths and food ran out. Too few, and predators picked you off. So here you are, one of a dozen souls huddled together. Parents, siblings, cousins, maybe unrelated wanderers who joined the band. Privacy doesn't exist. You live together, eat together, sleep together. And of course, the children are crying. One is sick, their nose running, their cough echoing in the cave. You pray it isn't something deadly, because there's no medicine, just herbs, hope, and whatever the shaman says will work. Morning hygiene, or the lack thereof. Let's talk hygiene. Forget toothbrushes, showers, or even clean water. Your teeth are blackened with grime. Your breath smells like old meat, and your hair is matted with grease. You haven't bathed in months. Nobody has. When you do, it's not because you want to feel fresh, it's because you fell through ice into a freezing river and had no choice. Your fingernails are cracked, filled with dirt, maybe blood from yesterday's work. Your skin is dry, cracked, bleeding in places. Every scratch could be an infection waiting to happen, and you can't fix it. No antibiotics, no bandages, just a prayer and maybe some moss pressed into the wound. Dressing for the day. Now it's time to dress for survival. You're already in hides, but you pull your cloak tighter. Clothing is stitched crudely with bone needles and animal sinew. Layers of fur keep out the cold, but they're heavy, stiff, and never quite enough. Your feet are wrapped in scraps of leather, stuffed with dry grass for insulation. They're always damp. They always smell. You don't have extra clothes. You wear the same set every day until it falls apart, and then you replace it with another hide, scraped clean of fat and dried in smoke. It's practical, but it rubs against your skin, and rashes are constant companions. Stepping outside. When you finally step outside the cave, the cold slams into you like a wall. The wind bites your cheeks raw. The horizon stretches wide and white, snowfields, ice and forests of pine. Mammoths may wander somewhere beyond, their massive shapes like moving hills, but mostly the landscape feels empty, silent, except it's never safe. Your footprints crunch loudly in the snow, and you know you're leaving a trail. Predators follow trails. Dire wolves, cave lions, even the occasional saber-toothed cat. You're not just a hunter here. You're prey. Hunger, always hunger. Your stomach growls before you've even started the day. You're always hungry. Food is never guaranteed. Sometimes you eat dried strips of reindeer or mammoth fat rendered into hard blocks. Sometimes it's roots dug from frozen soil, bitter and stringy. Sometimes it's nothing. You've gone days without eating before. Last night's meal, a bone cracked open for marrow, shared between 6 people. Maybe a handful of dried berries you found months ago. That's it. And today you'll have to search again. Hunger gnaws at you constantly, makes you weak, makes you cold. But in the Ice Age, it's simply part of waking up. The endless fear. As you gather your things, stone scraper, crude spear, maybe a flint blade, you realize once again that survival is a coin toss. Step outside the cave, and the Ice Age is waiting to kill you. Stay inside, and hunger will finish the job instead. There's no safety, no comfort, no rest, just survival, day after day. And as you cough, shiver, and clutch your fur cloak tighter, you realize you wouldn't last a day in the Ice Age. So you've managed to wake up, cough your lungs out in a smoky cave, pull on your damp shoes stuffed with grass, and step out into the blinding snow. Congratulations, that was the easy part. Now comes the real problem. Food. If you're imagining bacon, eggs, toast, or even a sad bowl of cereal, let me stop you right there. Breakfast in the Ice Age is not a meal, it's a scavenging ritual, a desperate hope that something edible exists within walking distance. And edible is doing a lot of work here. What's on the menu? Your menu has only a few recurring options. Scraps of dried meat, if you're lucky enough that the last hunt didn't completely fail. These are tough, leathery strips of reindeer or bison, smoked for days until they're more like chewing on a stick than food. Marrow bones, the lifeline of survival. Every bone, big or small, is cracked open with stone tools to suck out the fatty marrow inside. It's greasy, raw, and faintly sour if the bone has been sitting around too long. Roots and tubers, bitter, stringy, often frozen solid. You gnaw on them for the calories, not the taste. Think of the worst raw potato you've ever had, and then imagine it frozen like a rock. Berries or nuts. In summer or autumn, sure, but in the Ice Age winter, good luck. If you didn't dry them months ago, they're gone. Whatever's left over, maybe the scrapings from a cooking hide. Yes, hides were used as cooking vessels, filled with water and dropped in with hot stones. The edges get crusted with fat and smoke. Congratulations, that's your breakfast. This morning, you're not lucky. The band's stores are nearly empty. That last mammoth hunt, a disaster. The spears broke, the beast got away, and one man never came back, which means everyone eats less. So today's breakfast is a cracked bone, passed around the group. You get one suck, maybe two, of greasy marrow before it's gone. Then you pass it to your cousin, who passes it to a child. Everyone pretends not to notice how little they got. Chewing hunger. Hunger isn't a temporary annoyance here. It's your constant background noise. Your stomach growls even when you're eating. Your ribs are visible under your fur cloak. Your muscles ache because there's no fat left on your body, and there's no comfort food to look forward to. No bread, no stew, no sweet treats, just calories, however you can get them, however unappetizing they may be. In fact, food here is often a test of willpower. Can you stomach chewing on a strip of rawhide, soaked in water to soften it? Can you force down the half-rotten fat scraped off an old mammoth skull? Because if you can't, someone else will, and they'll live longer than you. Sharing with wolves. Sometimes, breakfast is a competition not just with your family, but with wolves. You've probably romanticized wolves from nature documentaries. Majestic, noble, running across snowy plains in packs. Forget that. These wolves are competition. They smell your meat before you do. They lurk near your camp, glowing eyes watching in the darkness. If you're weak and stumble, they'll test you. If a child wanders too far from the fire, they'll snatch them. And when you finally get a scrap of dried bison, you'll eat it fast because wolves will happily steal it right from your hands. In the Ice Age, wolves weren't man's best friend yet. They were a nightmare. The ritual of bone cracking nothing says bon appetit, quite like smashing open a femur on a rock. Every morning, someone takes the longest surviving bone from yesterday's hunt, raises it over their head, and smashes it down on stone until it cracks. The marrow leaks out, greasy and clotted. You suck it up like it's the nectar of life, because it is. The sound of cracking bones is the breakfast bell of the Ice Age. What about water? You're thirsty. The problem is water here wants to kill you. Streams look fresh, but they're full of parasites, dead animals, and frozen filth. You can melt snow, but it takes forever, and if you eat it directly, it lowers your core temperature and risks hypothermia. So you drink dirty melted snow, smoky water boiled with hot rocks in a hide, or sometimes, if you're lucky, liquid squeezed from half-frozen berries. Every sip tastes faintly of ash, leather, or dirt. You don't complain. You can't. Breakfast is social eating, isn't private here. You sit with your band, shoulder to shoulder, everyone eyeing the scraps. You know how much your neighbor got. They know how much you got. There's no sneaking extra portions, and if you try, you risk being cast out. Branded selfish in a world where selfishness gets everyone killed. So you take your bite of marrow, chew your bitter root, and nod as if it's enough. And if there's nothing, sometimes there's no breakfast at all. You wake up, your stomach twisting, and the band simply moves on. You march hungry, you hunt hungry, you sleep hungry, your stomach cramps, your body weakens, your breath comes shorter, and eventually, if luck doesn't change, hunger kills you before cold or predators do. This is normal. This is life. And so, as you chew your strip of leathery meat and choke it down with smoky snow water, you realize breakfast isn't fuel here, it's survival in its bleakest form. You've gnawed on marrow, shared scraps, maybe chewed a root until your jaw ached, but you're still starving. Everyone is. And in the Ice Age, there's only one real solution. Hunt. But don't picture yourself with a sleek bow, arrows, and leather boots. That's Hollywood. The reality is far more desperate, far more painful, and far more likely to kill you than to feed you. The gathering before the hunt. The band stirs. Men, women, sometimes even older children prepare. This isn't a gendered sport, it's survival, and everyone contributes. The hunters carry wooden spears tipped with stone blades, heavy, awkward, easily broken. Throwing spears at larks came later, but for now, it's raw muscle versus raw beast. Stone knives, chipped flint, sharp enough to cut, but brittle enough to snap mid-use. Rope from twisted sinew, useful for tying, dragging, or, if you're unlucky, patching wounds. Their armor is fur. It's heavy, it slows you down, and it stinks of smoke. Your shoes are wet within an hour. But you have no choice. The group doesn't walk in silence. The crunch of snow announces you to everything for miles. Predators know you're coming. Prey knows too. The first rule: you're not alone. You think you're the hunter, but step into the snowy plains, and you realize quickly, you're also prey. Cave lions, dire wolves, even saber-toothed cats. They all patrol the same territory you do, sniffing for the same scent of blood. Sometimes they shadow you, waiting to see if you fail, if you fall, if you bleed, if you die. They win. So before you've even seen a reindeer, your heart is pounding, because every tree line, every shadow could mean death. The cold math of hunting lets be brutally clear. Most hunts fail. Animals are faster, stronger, and better adapted. Reindeer, they move in herds. If you miss, they scatter. You go hungry. Bison, thick-skinned, heavy, dangerous. A charging bison will crush you before you even raise your spear. Mammoths, the dream hunt. So much meat, so much fat, enough to feed your band for weeks. But mammoths are walking walls of muscle, taller than houses, armed with tusks that can gore you in an instant. Hunting one is suicide, unless you have a cliff or a trap. Your chances, 1 in 5 maybe. More likely, you'll limp home empty-handed, hungrier than when you left. The chase say you're lucky. You spot reindeer in the distance. Your band crouches low, trying to circle them. There's no stealth here. The snow squeaks under your weight. Your breath steams in great clouds. The herd already senses you. The leader raises a spear. You rush forward, feet slipping on ice. The reindeer explode into motion, snow flying, legs pounding. You hurl your spear with everything you have. It thuds into the snow, a foot behind one of them. Missed. Another hunter connects, barely. A spear cuts a flank. Blood sprays. The herd scatters. Now the real work begins. You chase the wounded animal. Hours, miles. Your lungs burn. Your legs shake. The cold gnaws at you, but sweat pours under your hides. Too much sweat, too much cold. You risk hypothermia even as you run. And when you finally catch up, that's when it's most dangerous. The animal is panicked, wild-eyed, bleeding. It turns, kicks, charges. Your spear is your only hope. One good hit could bring it down. One slip could end you. You jab again and again. Flint scrapes against hide. The animal screams, thrashes. Hunters circle, stabbing, dodging hooves and antlers. It takes minutes, endless minutes, for the beast to finally fall. When it collapses, silence falls too, not relief, fear. Because now the real danger comes. Predators join the feast. The smell of blood carries for miles, and predators are faster than you. Wolves arrive first, circling, snarling, testing your band's courage. If you're strong, you shout, wave torches, hold them back. If you're weak, they lunge, ripping at the carcass, ripping at you. Sometimes lions come, sometimes bears. Sometimes you fight for your kill, and sometimes you abandon it altogether, walking home with nothing but bruises. The Ice Age doesn't care that you risked your life. It doesn't care that you're starving. Butchers work, say you hold the predators off. Now comes the brutal task of butchering the animal. No clean knives, no stainless steel tables, just flint, bone scrapers, and frozen fingers. You slice, saw, hack. Blood stains the snow, thick steam rising from the carcass. You eat raw scraps immediately. Warm meat straight from the kill, because who knows how much will survive the trip back. Then you cut, filling hide bags with chunks of meat, fat, and organs. Nothing is wasted. Bones for marrow, hide for clothing or shelter, sinew for sewing and rope, stomach for water carrying. Even the dung might be dried for fuel. This isn't a kill, it's a harvest, and it's the difference between life and death. And when you fail, of course, most hunts fail, you limp back at dusk, empty-handed, exhausted. The fire seems smaller, the children cry louder, and everyone eats less. Sometimes too many failures in a row mean death. Starvation creeps in. You can feel it, dizziness, weakness, a gnawing hollowness. People begin to drop out of the march. The old first, then the very young, sometimes even the strong. Hunting isn't about winning, it's about surviving the loss long enough to try again. Why you wouldn't survive you, with your sneakers and your granola bars, wouldn't last one day. Not even close. The hunger would eat you alive before the wolves ever did. The weight of that spear, the sting of the wind in your lungs, the smell of hot blood in frozen air, it would break you before the beast ever did. Because in the Ice Age, hunting wasn't just dangerous, it was despair, dressed in fur and snow. You survived the hunt, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you limped back empty-handed with nothing to show for the day but exhaustion and hunger. The fire is burning low. Children whimper from hunger. The smoke chokes your eyes. Everyone is weary, desperate, on edge. You tell yourself you're safe here, but you aren't, because the Ice Age doesn't let you rest. When the sun falls, the predators rise. The terror of nightfall darkness in the Ice Age is like nothing you've ever experienced. Today, you can flip a switch, light up a lamp, or glance at your phone. Back then, night was a living thing, thick, suffocating, total. A cave, even with fire, barely pierced the shadows. Beyond the flickering glow, the world was swallowed whole, and in that blackness there were eyes, dozens of them, watching, waiting. The crunch of paws on frozen snow, the low growl that carries on the wind, the silence that follows. The worst sound of all, because silence meant you were already surrounded. Even with a fire, you never felt safe. Fire was a fragile friend, weak against the hunger of the night. The apex killers. The Ice Age wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about surviving competition. You weren't the top predator, far from it. You were just one shaky link in a food chain dominated by monsters, dire wolves. Imagine wolves the size of mastiffs, shoulders as high as your waist, jaws built to crush bone. They traveled in packs of 10, 20, even 30. Once you were marked as prey, you weren't outrunning them. Cave lions, the largest cats to ever live in Europe, bigger than African lions, some standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder. They weren't afraid of humans. They hunted us. Saber-toothed cats, Smilodon, and Homotherium, powerhouses of ambush. They didn't run you down. They leapt from the dark, tackling you with the force of a falling tree, ending you with fangs longer than your hand. Cave hyenas. These weren't the spotted scavengers of Africa. These were beasts the size of bears, with jaws that could snap femurs. They hunted in shrieking packs, laughing as they tore you apart. Cave bears, enormous, unpredictable, sometimes 15 feet tall when standing upright. If a cave bear decided your shelter was its shelter, you moved. End of discussion. Every one of these creatures was faster than you, stronger than you, better armed than you, and most of them had teamwork. You had one stone spear and a fire that might gutter out before dawn. The watch sleep was a gamble. In every Ice Age band, someone stayed awake, clutching a spear, feeding the fire, scanning the darkness for movement. If their eyelids drooped, if their attention slipped even for a second, the predators came, and they weren't always patient. Wolves darted forward, testing the line of fire. Hyenas cackled from the tree line, bold enough to snatch scraps of meat from the very edge of camp. Sometimes lions padded silently close enough that you saw their glowing eyes beyond the flames. You might try to shout, to scare them, to wave torches. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it just made them bolder. And if you nodded off, if your head dropped for a single instant, then your watch became your funeral. The attack, when predators struck, it was never a fair fight. A wolf pack would lunge as one, scattering hunters, snapping at children, ripping at hides. Cave hyenas would scream and laugh as they tore into the camp, their shrieks rising above the panicked cries of humans. And cave lions. They didn't need noise. One leap, one slash of claws, and someone was gone. The fire turned the snow red. Spears jabbed wildly, often hitting nothing. People screamed, scattered. The smell of blood only drew more predators. If you were lucky, the animals took a carcass and retreated. If you weren't, they took a person, dragged them into the night, left nothing but silence. And silence was always worse, because silence meant they'd be back. The price of fire was your only weapon, but fire was fragile. Wood was rare, dung burned fast, and the cold devoured flames. Keeping a fire alive through the night meant constant vigilance. If it died, so did you. But even fire wasn't always enough. Hungry predators learned to test it. Some circled for hours, just outside the glow, until exhaustion claimed the humans. Others lunged through the smoke, snarling, scattering sparks. The Ice Age taught predators patience, and patience was deadly. The toll on the mind, even when no attack came, the fear never left. Imagine lying down to sleep, every creak, every crack of ice sounding like claws. Imagine waking to the sound of breathing that isn't human. Imagine your child crying in the dark and not knowing if the noise will bring something closer. The constant terror wore on the mind. People lived in a state of permanent anxiety, knowing they were always being watched. They scratched symbols on cave walls, prayed to spirits, begged the fire for protection. And still, many never saw dawn. Why you wouldn't survive you, with your locked doors, your street lights, your police patrols and fenced neighborhoods, you wouldn't survive one Ice Age night. The scratching, the growls, the glowing eyes, they'd break you before they ever touched you, because in the Ice Age, you weren't the hunter, you weren't the king, you were just meat, waiting your turn on the menu. You've made it through the cold, through the hunger, through the predators of the night. Somehow, against the odds, you're still alive. But here's the final truth of Ice Age survival. The hardest part isn't the freezing winds, or the empty belly, or even the saber-toothed cats. The hardest part is living with other humans, because while the Ice Age demanded cooperation, it also bred suspicion, rivalry, and desperation, and if the cold didn't kill you, sometimes your own people would. The fragile camp, picture your tribe, maybe 20-30 people at most. Not a bustling village, not a city, not a kingdom, just a cluster of families, bound together by necessity. Men, women, children, elders, all relying on each other to survive. But cooperation was fragile. Every mouth was one more risk. Every child was both hope and burden. The sick slowed everyone down. The old consumed food that wasn't always there. You, modern listener, might think family meant protection. In the Ice Age, family could mean resentment. Sharing or starving food wasn't just scarce, it was political. Who got the fattest cut of meat? Who was given marrow from the bone? And who got stuck chewing sinew? Who ate first? Who waited until the pot was scraped clean? Imagine the tension of dividing a single reindeer carcass among 30 hungry people. Children crying, elders coughing, warriors snarling under their breath. Everyone knew, eat less tonight, maybe die tomorrow. There were rules. Elders, mothers, hunters, shamans, they all fought for priority. Sometimes order held. Sometimes, when the hunger was sharp enough, it didn't. The shaman's grip. Every tribe had a figure of mystery. The shaman, not just healer, not just storyteller, but keeper of the invisible. They painted on cave walls, muttered charms, carried bones and feathers that were said to hold power. If the hunt failed, it was their fault, or their burden. They'd perform rituals by firelight, chanting, painting red ochre on faces, burning herbs to drive away bad spirits. To modern eyes, superstition. To Ice Age people, survival. Because believing the spirits were with you gave you the courage to leave the cave in the morning. But power cuts both ways. If someone was too strange, too unlucky, too accused of angering the spirits, they could be driven out, sometimes executed. Fear of nature spilled into fear of each other. Violence inside the camp. We like to imagine prehistoric tribes as peaceful bands of kin, sitting around fires, sharing stories, and yes, that happened. But archaeology tells us something darker. Skulls with blunt force trauma, broken ribs, healed badly, bones with spear points still lodged in them. These weren't all predator attacks. Many were human against human. Conflict came easy when survival was at stake. Maybe someone hoarded food. Maybe someone refused to share fire. Maybe a man coveted another's mate. Maybe an elder decided a sick child was too heavy to carry. And when violence erupted, there were no trials, no prisons, only blood in the snow, and silence afterward. Exile, the worst punishment. But even worse than death was banishment. If your tribe cast you out, you were finished. Alone, without fire, without spears, without eyes in the back of your head, the predators would find you within days. Imagine being shoved out of the cave, the fire at your back, your own kin refusing to meet your eyes. The snow stretches before you, empty, endless. Every step forward is another step into despair. You don't last long, and everyone in the camp knows it, which is why obedience, even grudging, kept you alive. You didn't have to like your tribe, you just had to need them. The thin line between trust and betrayal by day, the tribe worked together, women scraping hides, children gathering firewood, men setting traps. By night, they shared fire and stories. But beneath it all was a tension you could taste. What if the hunters failed tomorrow? What if the old woman's illness spread? What if the rival band 2 valleys away found your camp and took your food? Trust was everything. But trust was fragile, and it broke often. Why you wouldn't survive? You think modern office politics are bad. Imagine office politics when the stakes are literal, life or death. Imagine whispering about who deserves food, knowing every word could spark violence. Imagine obeying a shaman you don't believe in, because to disobey means exile. You wouldn't survive the weather. You wouldn't survive the predators. But above all, you wouldn't survive your own people. Because in the Ice Age, humanity's greatest threat wasn't always the mammoth or the cold. Sometimes it was each other. You like to think of yourself as prepared. You've got lighters at home, matches in the drawer, maybe even a fire starter tucked into a camping kit you never actually use. But here in the Ice Age, forget all of it. Congratulations, you are about to learn the hard way that technology, 20,000 years ago, wasn't sleek smartphones or even shiny bronze swords. It was flint. It was sticks. It was a sharpened rock tied to another rock with sinew that smelled like it died yesterday, because it did. And every single thing you took for granted, from a burning log to a sharpened blade, could be the difference between life and death. And almost all of it was heartbreakingly fragile. You wake up to cold ash. Imagine this. You wake up in your smoky cave at dawn, rubbing your eyes against the stinging air. You roll over toward the fire pit, expecting the comfort of orange embers glowing beneath a bed of ash. Instead, you see grey, nothing but cold, dead ash. The fire went out in the night. That's not just an inconvenience, that's a catastrophe, because you don't have a lighter, or a stove, or even a match. You don't have flint and steel yet. Steel won't exist for thousands of years. You have rocks, wood, and patience. If you want fire, you need to make it from scratch. And let me tell you, making fire in the Ice Age is about as fun as trying to start your car by screaming at it. The impossible spark, you've seen it in movies. Rub 2 sticks together, voila, fire, easy, right, wrong. First, you need the right wood, dry, straight-grained and seasoned. Good luck finding that in a frozen tundra where everything is damp, rotten, or buried under snow. Then you need a bow drill or hand drill, which means you need to have carved one in advance. Then you need tinder, dry moss, shredded bark, fungus, something that will catch the tiniest ember. Now you rub, and rub, and rub. Your hands blister, smoke curls up, and just as you think you've got it, poof, gone. Meanwhile, your tribe is staring at you, shivering, eyes hollow, waiting. Because no fire means no warmth, no cooked food, no light, and no protection from the wolves prowling just outside the circle. One mistake with fire, and you've doomed everyone. Fire wasn't just survival, it was everything. The god of flame, because of this fragility, fire took on sacred weight. It wasn't just warmth, it was spirit. In every Ice Age culture, fire was treated as a gift from beyond. Archaeologists have found hearths carefully maintained, ashes layered for years, as if the tribe was terrified of letting them go out. And they were, because if the fire died, people often risked their lives to steal embers from rival groups, sneaking across snowy valleys just to bring back a coal wrapped in moss. Imagine risking your life for a tiny flicker of orange light. That was reality. You'd freeze before you ever managed it. Fragile tools. Okay, maybe you've got fire going. Congratulations. But what about weapons? Tools? Because your bare hands won't bring down a mammoth, and your teeth aren't sharp enough to chew through hide. Enter flint. Flint tools sound impressive. They're not. They're fragile razor blades made of stone. Every spear point, every knife edge, every scraper was chipped painstakingly from a flint core by knapping, striking one rock against another to peel off razor-thin flakes. Do it wrong, and the rock shatters. Do it right, and you get a tool sharp enough to slice meat or pierce hide, but so brittle it can snap the first time it hits bone. Spears broke constantly, arrows shattered on impact, scrapers dulled after a single use, and every break meant hours of work by firelight, napping a new edge, fingers cut and bleeding from razor-thin shards. You'd drop the rock, cut your palm and bleed out before you figured out how to chip a blade. The reality of hunting gear. Let's talk spears. You picture sleek, balanced weapons. In truth, they were heavy, awkward shafts, tipped with fragile stone points tied on with sinew and resin. Throw one wrong, and the point snapped, hit a rib instead of soft flesh, and it exploded like glass. Bows and arrows existed, but not everywhere, and they were primitive. Most groups relied on thrusting spears, which meant you had to get close, terrifyingly close to prey that outweighed you 10-1. And if your point broke mid-hunt, congratulations, you're standing in front of a mammoth holding a stick. The endless maintenance. Everything had to be maintained. Hide thongs had to be retied, spears resharpened, stone blades re-napped, fires constantly tended. Every tool was temporary, every flame fleeting. Your life wasn't just hunting and eating, it was maintaining the fragile scaffolding of survival. And one mistake, a broken spear, a dead fire, a dull scraper could cascade into starvation or death. Why you wouldn't survive? Here's the truth. You live in a world of permanence. Gas lighters, stainless steel knives, stoves that ignite with the turn of a dial. You don't think about them failing. In the Ice Age, everything failed. Fire died, tools broke, spears shattered, and every failure wasn't just an inconvenience. It was death creeping closer. You wouldn't last a day, not because you couldn't eat, not because the cold would kill you, but because the fragile little miracles that kept Ice Age people alive, tools of stone and flame, would slip through your fingers like ash in the wind. You like to think of home as safe. 4 walls, a roof, maybe a heater humming in winter or air conditioning in summer. But here, in the Ice Age, the word home doesn't mean safety. It doesn't even mean permanence. It means whatever you can throw together before nightfall so you don't freeze to death. And tomorrow, you'll have to abandon it anyway. The cave myth. When we picture Ice Age humans, we imagine caves, cavemen, cave paintings, cave fires, caves, caves, caves. But let's break that fantasy. First problem. Caves are rare. Entire valleys might have only a handful of decent ones, which means if you find one, you're probably not the first. Step inside with your tribe, hopeful for warmth and shelter, and you're likely to find teeth, gigantic bare teeth, hyenas curled in the back, their glowing eyes fixed on you. Or worse, a cave lion, already licking its chops. And if the cave is empty, it might not be for long. Predators also need shelter. A cave that feels safe at night could be claimed by something larger while you're out hunting. Even when you get a cave to yourself, it's no paradise. The walls drip with moisture, the floors are slick with bat guano. Fires fill the chamber with choking smoke. Within minutes your eyes burn, your lungs sting, and the children are coughing. The truth, caves were sometimes used, yes, but they weren't cozy homes. They were stopgaps, temporary hideouts in a world where nothing was built to last. Mammoth-bone huts. So what did most people do? They built, on the mammoth plains of Ice Age Europe, tribes constructed shelters out of bones. Picture this. A giant dome, made from the ribs of creatures the size of buses, tusks curved overhead, like Gothic arches, skulls propped as anchors. Over this bony skeleton, you lash hides, reindeer, horse, orcas, anything you can skin. From a distance, it looks impressive, a cathedral of survival. Step inside, and the illusion collapses. The hides flap in the wind, the seams leak cold, the fire in the center sends smoke spiraling until everyone's coughing and tearing up. And when a storm piles snow on the roof, the bones groan, sometimes they snap. Entire families crushed beneath the weight of winter. And let's remember, to build one of these, you first needed mammoth bones. That meant hunting a mammoth, which meant risking death before you even had a chance to huddle under its ribs. Wooden tents and smoke in forested regions. Tribes used trees, bent saplings lashed into crude domes, hides thrown over. Imagine a giant smoke-stained teepee, strong enough to last a week, maybe two. But Ice Age trees were no sturdy pines. They were stunted, twisted, and brittle from centuries of permafrost winds. Your shelter creaks constantly. Every gust threatens to tear the skins loose. The fire inside sends up sparks that threaten to set the whole thing ablaze. By modern standards, this isn't a house. It's a desperate experiment in keeping frostbite away for another night. A constant march. But even if you manage a hut, you won't stay. The Ice Age forces movement. Animals, the only source of meat, migrate. Plants appear for only weeks before frost kills them. Rivers freeze solid, then thaw into raging floods. Stay in one place too long, and you starve. So your life is a march, a constant, punishing march. Imagine trudging across a frozen valley, with snow up to your knees. You're dragging a sled made from wood and hide, creaking under the weight of firewood, bones, and your only cooking pot. Your children stumble behind, wrapped in scraps of fur. An elder coughs blood into the snow, but still walks because if she falls, she'll be left behind. The wolves follow at a distance. Always home on your back. Think about what home means to you. A place to return to, a place you can decorate, personalize, fill with furniture. Now erase all of that. In the Ice Age, home is what you can carry. A strip of hide, a sharpened stone, maybe a bundle of firewood if you're lucky. That's it. If you're sick, too bad, the tribe keeps moving. If you're injured, someone might drag you for a while, but not forever. Sooner or later, you're left behind. Archaeology of absence. When archaeologists dig into Ice Age settlements, they often find circles of mammoth bones, charred patches of earth, shards of stone blades, ghostly fingerprints of lives once lived. That's all that remains of home. Not walls, not roofs, just circles of bones, now scattered, windblown, and silent. Think about that. Thousands of years later, even the shelters themselves are gone. That's how fragile they were. Psychological toll. It wasn't just physical, it was mental. Imagine never knowing where you'll sleep tomorrow. Imagine tearing down your shelter again and again. Imagine the weight of impermanence pressing on your soul. Modern humans crumble when Wi-Fi goes down. Ice Age humans lived knowing security was a word that didn't exist. why you wouldn't survive. Here's the truth. You wouldn't die from hunger or cold or even predators, not first. You'd die from exhaustion, from the endless crushing demand of movement, of building fragile homes that collapse, of never feeling secure. In the Ice Age, home was never permanent. It was a bone circle, a skin hut, a smoky cave, and all of them were temporary. You wouldn't survive, not because you couldn't fight, but because you couldn't live without roots, and in the Ice Age, roots were impossible. You've survived the hunger. You've trudged through the snow. You've even managed to build a hut that didn't collapse on your head. Congratulations, you're still alive. But now comes the real danger. The things you can't see. Because in the Ice Age, it isn't just the cold that kills. It's the fever that comes after a scratch. The cough that won't go away. The infection spreading quietly under your skin. A fragile body in a brutal world. Your body today has medicine on its side. A scratch, you wash it with soap. An ache, you take ibuprofen. A fever, you rest, maybe antibiotics. If it's serious, now strip all that away. Imagine slicing your hand open while cutting meat with a flint knife. The blade is sharp but unclean, smeared with blood and dirt from the last hunt. You don't wash it. You can't. Soap doesn't exist. Bandages don't exist. You wrap it in hide and keep working. Within days your hand swells, turns red and throbs like fire. The infection creeps up your arm. You can smell it. And there's no cure. That's the Ice Age. Not death by mammoth tusks, but death by splinter. The constant threat of infection. Let's talk wounds. Everyone has them. Flint blades cut fingers. Wooden spears splinter into palms. Frost cracks skin until it bleeds. And when you butcher an animal, your hands are drenched in its blood, bile and guts. Every cut is an open door to infection. And infections spread fast. Without antibiotics, even minor wounds could become deadly. Archaeologists have found Ice Age skeletons with bones eaten away by infections. Some survived long enough to show healing. Many didn't. Now picture it. A hunter gashes his leg. The wound festers. The tribe watches him groan, shake, and finally fall silent. He's gone. Not because he wasn't strong, but because there was no penicillin for another 20,000 years. Respiratory illnesses. And it wasn't just cuts, it was the air. Inside those mammoth-bone huts, fires smoked constantly. There were no chimneys, no ventilation. People sat day and night in haze so thick their lungs filled with soot. Children wheezed, elders coughed blood. Chronic bronchitis, pneumonia, and lung infections were rampant. You'd freeze without the fire, but breathe the fire too long, and you drowned slowly in your own lungs. A choice between freezing and suffocating. Pick one. Parasites and vermin. Think Ice Age humans didn't have parasites. Think again. They lived with fleas, lice and ticks crawling through their furs. Worms infested their guts. Archaeologists examining coprolites, fossilized poop, have found evidence of roundworms and whipworms. Imagine the belly pain, the diarrhea, the wasting. In a world where every calorie mattered, parasites stole food from inside you. Children with swollen bellies weren't just hungry. They were infested, and it never went away. No deworming tablets, no clean clothes, no reprieve. The silent burden of malnutrition. And then there's malnutrition. Even when you ate, it wasn't balanced. Meat heavy in winter, roots and berries in summer. No steady vitamins. Teeth rotted, bones weakened, joints failed early. Archaeologists find skeletons with rickets, scurvy, brittle bones, all signs of chronic malnutrition. Imagine trying to run from a predator when your legs literally ache from lack of calcium. Childbirth and death for women. The greatest danger wasn't predators or starvation. It was childbirth. No midwives, no sterile tools, no cesarean sections. A difficult birth meant death for both mother and child. Pelvis too narrow, baby breech, cord wrapped around the neck. There was no intervention, just blood, screaming and silence. This was the reality. Giving life often meant giving up your own. The psychological toll of illness wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Imagine being sick in a world that never stops. The tribe has to move, but you can't walk. Do they leave you behind? Do they drag you? Illness became a test of worth. If you slowed the group too much, you endangered everyone. And sometimes, mercy meant being left in the snow with a fur blanket and a final fire. Symbolism of disease. In the end, disease in the Ice Age wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A cough that grew worse. A wound that turned black. A woman who didn't get up after childbirth. It was silent, invisible, and relentless. The true predator of the Ice Age wasn't the mammoth or the wolf. It was infection. Why you wouldn't survive. And that's why you wouldn't last a day. Not because you couldn't fight or build or run, but because you'd slice your hand or cough too long, or drink parasite-filled water, and without medicine you'd be gone. The Ice Age was a war against unseen enemies, and those enemies almost always won. If you've made it this far through hunger, cold, predators and disease, you might think you're safe. But survival in the Ice Age wasn't only about muscles and firewood, it was about people. About living in tight, fragile webs of trust, ritual and belief. Because in this world, you couldn't go it alone. Community was everything. And belief, those strange stories painted on cave walls, whispered at fires, was the glue that held it all together. Without it, the Ice Age would have crushed humanity before it even began. The fragile web of community. Imagine waking up in the pre-dawn frost. Around you lie 20, maybe 30 others. Parents, children, cousins, elders. Everyone huddled together in a smoky, stinking hut. There's no such thing as privacy. Every breath you take is shared. Every cough echoes. Every mouth is another demand on scarce food. This is your tribe, your only lifeline. Stray too far and you die. Even the strongest hunter couldn't kill a mammoth alone. Even the best gatherer couldn't find enough roots to feed herself all winter. Survival required numbers, division of labor, the old teaching the young, the women scraping hides, the men carving spears, the children fetching firewood. One person's failure risked everyone, conflict in close quarters. But people are people, and put 30 humans in a smoky hut for too long, and tension rises. Who gets the fattest cut of meat? Who carries the heaviest load? Who decides when to move camp? These weren't abstract questions, they were life or death. Disputes could shatter tribes. And unlike today, you couldn't just move out or get a new job. Leave the group, and you froze alone on the step. Stay, and you swallowed your pride, bowed to the leader, and hoped tomorrow's hunt didn't make things worse. In many cases, dominance fell to the strongest hunter or the one with the most experience. Elders, scarred and weathered, often became advisors. But leadership wasn't guaranteed by fairness. It was survival by force of will, backed by the threat of exclusion. The burden of sharing was both necessary and brutal. Meat spoiled quickly. Once a mammoth fell, the entire tribe feasted, carving huge slabs, roasting hunks over fires, drying what little they could. But hoarding, that was unthinkable. Hoarding meant betrayal, and betrayal meant being cast out. Archaeological evidence suggests rituals of sharing, formalized ways of cutting and distributing meat, ensuring no one was left hungry. Yet fairness wasn't perfect. Bones reveal malnourished children, even in tribes that had mammoth kills, meaning some bellies filled while others stayed hollow. So imagine this, you return from a long hunt, hands frozen, belly gnawing itself, only to watch the choicest cuts handed to someone else. Do you protest, risk exile, or swallow your hunger because survival depends on keeping the group intact? Death in the tribe. And what about the sick? The weak, the injured? Sometimes they were cared for. Archaeologists have found skeletons of Ice Age humans who lived years with severe disabilities. evidence their groups fed and protected them. But other times, mercy meant leaving someone behind, wrapped in a fur, with a small fire dwindling beside them. It wasn't cruelty, it was math. The tribe could only carry so much, and if one person slowed the march too long, the whole group risked starvation. Community was love and cruelty in equal measure. Both kept the tribe alive. The rise of belief. But humans didn't survive on meat and fire alone. They survived on meaning. Look at the cave walls in Lascaux, Chauvet, or Altamira, horses racing across stone, mammoths looming, handprints pressed like ghostly signatures. These weren't decorations. They were stories, rituals, a way to control a world that felt uncontrollable. The Ice Age was chaos. Storms, starvation, predators. Belief was order. Ritual hunts were painted before real ones. Shamans donned antlers, covered themselves in furs, muttered chants by firelight. Animal skulls were placed carefully in circles, bones arranged in patterns. To modern eyes, superstition. To Ice Age humans, survival strategy. Because belief bound people together, it gave them reasons to trust, to obey, to hope. Shamans and spirits. Every tribe likely had a shaman, a healer, storyteller, spiritual guide. Someone who carried bones etched with markings, who whispered to the unseen forces of the world. When a child fell sick, the shaman burned herbs and chanted. When the hunt failed, he painted animals on stone walls and prayed. He might not have cured disease or brought food, but he gave people the strength to try again. Without belief, despair would have eaten tribes faster than wolves. Burials and the afterlife. And what about death? Archaeologists have found Ice Age burials with bodies covered in red ochre, laid with tools, beads, and even entire mammoth tusks. These weren't just corpses thrown away, they were honored, sent into an afterlife with gifts. That tells us something. Ice Age humans didn't see death as an end. They saw it as a journey, and preparing the dead wasn't just ritual, it was comfort for the living, proof that even in suffering there was meaning. The weight of belief, but belief came with costs. Rituals meant time and resources spent not on survival but on ceremony. Shamanic authority could tip into tyranny. Superstition might lead to abandoning food sources or sacrificing members for imagined spirits. Still, without those rituals, tribes might have splintered under the pressure. Faith was the invisible shelter. Why you wouldn't survive? Here's the truth: you wouldn't last a day, not because of hunger or cold, but because of loneliness. Because without a tribe, you were nothing, and without belief, even the tribe might collapse. Community meant survival, but it also meant sacrifice, conflict, and submission. Belief gave comfort, but it also demanded obedience. The Ice Age wasn't just about enduring the cold, it was about enduring each other, and that's something most of us today wouldn't survive. So, here you are. You've trudged through endless snow, crouched in smoky huts, fought off hunger pangs, endured lice and parasites, and even learned the rituals that gave your tribe hope. You've lasted longer than most modern people ever could, but now comes the hardest part, realizing just how slim your odds truly were. Because in the Ice Age, survival wasn't guaranteed by strength, cleverness, or even luck. It was a lottery, and the house almost always won. A life of constant fragility. Imagine waking up every morning with the same thought: can I make it through today? Not the year, not the season, just today. Every decision was survival critical. Do you risk venturing into the storm to hunt, or do you huddle in camp and hope tomorrow is better? Do you give your last scrap of meat to your child, or eat it yourself so you're strong enough to hunt? Do you slow the group by carrying a sick elder, or do you walk faster while listening to their coughing fade behind you? There were no right answers, only brutal ones. And that's the reality. In the Ice Age, existence was balancing on a knife edge. The brutality of death wasn't rare, it was routine. Children died from fevers before they could walk. Mothers died in childbirth. Hunters were gored by mammoth tusks, or bled out from a splinter gone septic. Elders froze in the night, their hearts slowing quietly while smoke drifted from the last fire. Archaeological sites from the Ice Age show scattered graves, bones gnawed by scavengers, ochre burials marking young and old alike. Death wasn't shocking, it was expected, and grief was a luxury. Tribes couldn't afford for long. Survival demanded moving on, even when the bodies were still warm. The myth of strength: you might think strength alone would have saved you, that if you were tall, broad, muscled, you'd have had a better chance. But the truth is, strength was only part of the equation. Too strong, and you needed more food than the group could provide. Too weak, and you slowed everyone down. The ones who lived longest weren't always the strongest. They were the ones who endured, who bent with the storm instead of breaking under it. Survival was about resilience, about grinding through hunger and exhaustion until your body couldn't anymore. The weight of memory, and imagine what it did to your mind. Every day you watched others die, children buried in shallow graves, friends torn apart by wolves, parents fading into coughing shadows. Trauma wasn't a rare occurrence. It was daily life, and yet somehow people kept going. Maybe that's why they painted the caves, to remember, to give meaning to the horror, to convince themselves that their struggle mattered, that when the tribe vanished, their stories would remain. The paintings weren't just art, they were defiance, proof that even in a world designed to erase them, humans could leave a mark. Why you wouldn't survive. And this is where it all comes together. Why you wouldn't last a day. Because you've grown soft in comparison. You have blankets, walls, antibiotics, food waiting in a fridge, lights that never die. If it snows, you stay inside. If you're hungry, you open a cupboard. If you're sick, you see a doctor. But in the Ice Age, none of that existed. You'd step out of your warm home into that frozen world and be gone before the sun set. The Ice Age wasn't a test of strength. It was a gauntlet of starvation, disease, predators, storms, and the fragile loyalties of your own tribe. And almost every time, humanity lost. Only a stubborn few survived, just enough to carry us forward, just enough to eventually build fires that didn't choke us, shelters that didn't collapse, medicines that could heal. The final thought: so tonight, when you pull your blanket tight, or sip clean water from your glass, or grumble because the Wi-Fi is slow, remember the Ice Age. Remember the people who scraped hides with bloody hands, who gave birth in freezing huts, who painted mammoths on stone walls by flickering firelight. They suffered so you wouldn't have to. They endured the unendurable, and they didn't survive by strength alone. They survived by being stubborn, communal, and creative in a world that wanted them gone. The Ice Age wasn't a time for heroes. It was a time for survivors. And that's why you, with your soft bed and warm socks, wouldn't last a single day.